In Canada, the discovery of hundreds of unmarked children's graves has reopened wounds. The old unmarked remains are that of young native school children once sent to residential schools in an effort to assimilate them into Canadian society. Now, teams armed with special antennas are working hard to find even more unmarked burials. Nikki Anastasakis of Inside the Story CHCH has more.
It all started with the discovery of the remains of 215 children at a former Catholic-run Indian school in Kamloops on May 27th. Then, 751 unmarked graves were found in Saskatchewan at a similar residential school on June 24th. Then, another 182 unmarked graves were found at a boarding school in British Columbia on June 30th. The discoveries are being called evidence of crimes against humanity. The schools were among more than 100 such institutions, compulsory boarding schools funded by the Canadian government and run by religious authorities during the 19th and 20th century.
Imagine if these were your children and they were just taken away. Taken away, some of them, and never seen again.
More than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend state-funded Christian boarding schools in an effort to assimilate them into Canadian society. Thousands of children died there due to malnutrition, disease, other accidents, and in some cases, and perhaps more likely, many untold abuses. Those children never to return home.
I still cannot comprehend the amount of death. People are missing, buried, and there was no goodbyes from anybody.
The discoveries have led to calls for thorough searches of other such sites across Canada, using what's called ground-penetrating radar, a tool used in archaeological digs around the globe for roughly 30 years to discover and survey historic buildings, structures, and grave sites buried deep underground, hidden from history until now. As for why these discoveries are happening only now, for decades experts say this information was all documented and published, but there was no way of knowing exactly where burial sites were located until organizations started offering up help to locate these sites using GPR, which began the truthing process, as some are now calling it.
Ground-penetrating radar is a type of remote sensing technology where a small antenna is pulled across the surface of the ground and sends a radar signal down into the earth. That radar signal can be set at multiple frequencies, and those different frequencies will send different waves down into the ground. That signal bounces back differently depending on what's underneath the surface.
According to anthropological archaeologist Dr. Keisha Supernant from the University of Alberta, different shifts in soil composition signal changes below the ground. Radar pulses, in fact, send back different signals that can indicate structures like walls or tree stumps and graves.
We do not see any bodies or bones using this particular technique. This does not work like an X-ray. Really what it is showing is the disturbance of the ground when a grave is dug.
Canadian researchers like Supernant are helping inform the public about what's taking place on residential school sites now. The University of Alberta recently releasing a video outlining how GPR works. The ground-penetrating radar is much like a medical ultrasound.
Multiple techniques build our confidence that what we're actually seeing using these technologies is in fact a grave, but we can never say we have for sure found a grave, and we can never say when we have negative results that no graves are present.
While ground-penetrating radar helps discover graves, technicians say there's a 10% margin of error with the radar, so the exact number of bodies discovered is still unclear. In fact, experts say many of the graves were once marked, but those headstones were removed, and that in itself is a crime. For many, these new discoveries are emotionally a double-edged sword. On one hand, finding the remains of innocent children is heart-wrenching, yet the process is helping to bring about a sense of closure at last.
If you're experiencing trauma or feeling triggered by this, there are resources available, including the 24-hour National Indian Residential School Survivor Crisis Line.
With government grants and donations pouring in, the search for undocumented burial sites unfortunately doesn't end here. For Inside the Story, I'm Nikki Anastasakis.